Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to my talk on unmasking insider threats. So my name is Maxim Deweerdt. I am a principal instructor for SANS. I teach the Sec 511 course and the Management 551 course. To translate that into a human language, that is the technical SOC course, which we discuss detection engineering, how to set up a SOC from an analyst perspective, all the tools that you need. And the management course is really about how to set up a SOC from a governance perspective. What are all the elements that you need in there? I also work for Inviso. We have our booth here today at Cybersec as well, where I am in the management team of our managed services. So I am basically part of the SOC team that we offer in Inviso. Also, in my free time, I like to dive. So if you see me around, that's what I do. Anyways, so I want to talk a bit today about insider threats. Yes, so there are many different ways that insider threats can materialize in our environments. In most cases, if you already have a monitoring SOC in place, there are few use cases already in there when it regards to that insider threats. You're looking at people are doing suspicious activities, and sometimes, and in most cases, this involves data. Yes, so you definitely want to make sure that people are not doing something with data that they should not be doing. So in order to investigate this, we need this type of telemetry in the SOC. Now, I want to see a show of hands here. Who has activated tried to do some type of a data loss prevention, DLP type of project in the last few years? Yeah? And how successful has that been? You don't have to answer me. I've been in that case many, many times when customers or even internally, you activate a DLP project, the data loss prevention project. Everyone thinks we're just going to turn this on, and then magically we'll have all these alerts, and then yay, we now are preventing people from sharing information they shouldn't be sharing. And this is where the catch really comes into play. We're going to throw all these signals into the SOC. Yes, because they're already monitoring things, right? So, I mean, we're going to give them all this DLP information as well, and they can now monitor if users are doing suspicious things with data. I don't know if you've been at the SOC side of this, but suddenly you now have all these alerts popping in on things that we have no context about as security analysts. On, yes, this user is doing this with this file. Do I know? Maybe this is authorized usage, but it was the policy that has been wrongly configured. Maybe this is unauthorized usage, but it is an exception. Obviously, always exceptions, yeah? Someone said that this was a good idea. Or this is a case where we really have an insider threat. Someone is trying to do something with data they shouldn't be doing. How do I know in the SOC? That's a bit the argument that I'm going to try to make, and I think with a couple of principles, we can make this work with modern technology. Before we go into this, just to give you a quick highlight, the most important element in any type of security operations and the most important metric that we have there is the dwell time. Yeah, so dwell time is basically the time between an adversary compromising us and us detecting them, yes? Now, as you can see, these numbers are actually going down, maybe not towards the level that we would expect, but in 2013 it was 10 days. That's 10 days between someone compromising us and us detecting it, yeah? Actually, the 24 number for the first time ever is going up. It's now 11 days. Yeah, so it was always going down, but it's now going up a bit. Now, question to you, is this acceptable? Yeah, probably not, yeah? I mean, imagine that you would have to give the news to management that, well, we've been compromised, yeah? And then the question inevitably is going to be asked, about how long have they been inside? Well, about 10 days. I mean, why are we putting so much money into the SOC operation and you should be detecting things immediately, yada, 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 right? So this is not a good thing. What's interesting though, this has been going down for many, many years. We used to be over in the 400 X amount of days way back. This has increased a lot, not just because of the fact that we are doing things better, but because of the fact that adversaries have started to do something else, which is ransomware. The whole point of ransomware is to be detected almost immediately. That's the whole idea, because they want you to pay a ransom in X amount of days, for example, right? So these numbers have been skewed. If you take out the ransomware part on those 10 days, You can take an educated guess what the number is. So this is global average, of course, yeah? But you're back up in the hundreds, yeah? Obviously, a lot of organizations are able to detect sooner. A lot of organizations, it takes them way too long to detect anything. And this isn't just a problem coming from our XDR tools and our SIEM tools and anything else. This is increasingly a problem because of the fact that adversaries are using techniques that do not always alert in your classic XDR and SIEM coverage. Yeah? They're using compromising identities in the clouds. They're using cloud-native services. And more often than not, they are compromising data without you realizing it. Someone is shuffling data around. They're accessing data sources that you shouldn't be accessed. But hey, we have DLP, right? So this is stopping and blocking everything. But it wasn't part of the scope, or we abandoned it because it didn't work. So that's something that we need to investigate. Now, what I just said is a really big problem for most SOC operations. If you have a SOC in-house, or maybe you have a provider that is taking care of this, anyone who's ever tried to build a SOC knows that, first of all, it's super expensive. Good luck. Not only finding or buying all the tools you need to get a SOC up and running, but then also finding the people. That's the most expensive part typically, especially if you want to do this 24/7 here in the region. Yeah, again, good luck with that. Yeah, budget is going to be immense. This is why outsourcing happens so much, often to lower cost countries, and then we have other problems. Second thing is, in a lot of SOC environments, there's still too many alerts to look at. Yeah? And then we come to the fourth part, and I'll get to the third part in a minute, but it's getting increasingly more difficult to be a SOC analyst because of the fact that it's not just endpoints you need to know, it's not just network you need to know, we now need to know clouds, and let's be honest, you don't need to know one cloud environment, no. Someone decided it was a good idea to have our developers in AWS, and then, but IT actually prefers Azure, so let's also have Azure, and then maybe you're using Oracle Cloud or something else just because of legacy or whatever, yeah? And so we now have 3 cloud environments that not only will have to secure, but that are sending telemetry to your SOC, and that you need to have your SOC analyst understand what is going on in those cloud environments. Yay. And I'm not even going to go into the OT security parts, industrial control systems. There's now companies that say, hey, we already have a SOC. Let's just put it into the SOC. They're already monitoring, right? Those people have no idea what it is to be in an OT environment or what those things do. So it doesn't make any sense. And it's the same problem now with data security. We're buying tools, maybe it's even part already of your ecosystem, and you're just throwing them into the SOC, expecting those people to know what this is about. Doesn't make any sense. And obviously, we still have a skill shortage. It's getting better. We're trying to solve this a bit with automation and so on. Yeah, AI, yay. I'll talk about this in a minute. But it's still there. Yeah, so this is actually a hard problem to solve. Now, I'm not going to go into this too much because that's a whole different presentation. But I think it's relevant for what I'm going to talk about in the next slides. What is a critical success factor of modern SOC or a modern, let's say, fusion center, however you want to call it, operations? One thing is you need to have some type of a SOAR capability, which is security, orchestration, automation, and response. Why is this so important? If you don't have this, then forget about having, and I hate the word, but I'll use it anyways, single pane of glass, but it's a real thing. The worst thing as an analyst to do is having to check 10 different dashboards to try to find out what's going on. You need some type of a consolidated view somewhere. Second thing is, if you do not have a SOAR, you'll never be able to do automation. And honestly, I do a lot of interviews for SOC analysts, for our SOC, but also for customers. You know what one of the questions is that almost every tier 1 junior SOC analyst asks right now? How automated is your SOC? Because who would want to work right now in a SOC environment where you're still doing manual triage as a tier 1 or as a junior analyst, throwing everything over the hedge, and the minute it gets more interesting, you're going to have to escalate it to someone else. Once you've been in a SOC that is a bit more a modern approach with automation, that's what you're looking for. So that's also an important element. And if we can use automation well, we can then finally use our human brain power for what it was actually intended to be used for, which is the more complicated things. This is why we have humans in a SOC. And then, and actually I should reverse this order, then we can maybe look into AI and how we could leverage AI to make us a bit more smarter. And I'll get to this in my presentation today as well. Now, that's just to set the stage a bit. Let's have a look at data security and how it could work in a SOC. This is really going to be, and I want to be very clear, that's going to be the topic, is if I want to have telemetry in a SOC from data security, how could that work? Yeah, that's the idea. We're not going to talk about DLP implementation, data governance, risk and compliance. It's really specifically how can a SOC operate with that data from data security products. And to make this a bit more practical, I've taken one product that is around. It's going to be the Microsoft Purview product, and show you a bit on what some elements could work in a SOC environment. Full disclosure, the reason why we selected Purview is because we work with Purview a lot. This also applies to any other data security tool that's out there that has the same capabilities, all right? So it's not product specific. So I think the first element, when something happens in a SOC environment, when there's an alert data security-wise coming in, is the question, is this now something normal or is this now something malicious? Yeah? As I mentioned in my introduction, this is really not that obvious. I'll give you a prime example. Someone has uploaded a copy of something to a personal Dropbox or a OneDrive or a Google Drive. By the way, side note, OneDrive, personal usage. Anyone has struggled with that in the recent weeks and months with Microsoft? I don't know if you know this, but they changed I have a bit of a hate-love relationship with Microsoft. So they do a lot of things right, but they do a lot of things wrong as well. And so what they changed recently, by the way, in case you didn't know, is that users are presented with an option now, whether you want to couple your personal OneDrive account on your enterprise device. Why? I still fail to see what the use case of this is. Yeah, it's only going to have these things happening more and more. But so this can happen completely normal. One of the things that can happen is, let's say you're working in sales, you have a technical fact sheet that you want to share with an external party, and for whatever reason, you can't send it through email or whatever. They do it all the time. They upload it somewhere else. It is not confidential document anyways, yeah? And so then someone else can access it. Happens all the time in almost every single environment. But how do I differentiate this from a SOC perspective to someone that is actually trying to upload confidential data to personal OneDrive again, or Dropbox or something else, with malicious intent? What my data security solution is going to show me is that something happened that wasn't supposed to happen. But what then? One of the things that we always make very clear when we're introducing an alert in our SOC is, but what is an analyst supposed to do with this? Great, I have the alert now, but what am I supposed to investigate? Do I have access to any other information? Do I know what this user is? Do I know what the policies are? What's normal in that department? Things like that. It's not very clear. So we're going to have to try to change this a bit. Now, here is where I'm going to switch into a bit an unorthodox approach, but I think it works. And we tried this a few times, and I think that's the way forward. Start with things like insider risk management. And I'll explain in a minute what that is. So insider risk management is a small portion of what most of data security tools do. Yeah? It's typically the thing that gets activated the last, because we're first going to do a big data security project and labeling and so on, and then maybe we'll look into insider risk management. But the cool thing with insider risk management is that it identifies and tries to immediately weigh on risky user behavior. And the cool thing with this is that with some simple policies, and this is not the same as a data labeling project that takes years to complete, with some simple policies, you can already start to identify, is someone doing what they're doing with that data, what I just showed you, that alerts, is this now malicious or not? Is this something that we need to further investigate in the SOC or not? Combining the signals from your other security tools, typically your XDR tools or your SIEM instance. And this is a really nice way for having the SOC, we give them a broader visibility, and at the same time have the right information to make an educated decision. Do I need to act, or do I close this because it's not relevant for security right now? This is completely different from the normal data loss prevention projects, yeah, that most organizations are doing. There's nothing wrong with data loss prevention. It's just a very big project, typically, yeah, that by the time it's completed, there might already have things happened. Insider risk management, and that's the case that I want to make today, is something you can activate in a matter of weeks in most data security tools and allow you to get insight immediately into some of the risky behaviors, combine that with the insights or the visibility that the SOC already has, and you really have a very good tool at identifying what users are doing is normal or not. And so what's a bit the workflow when there's insider risk management that you want to activate? First thing that you need to do is use a couple of policies. Policies. I can see some of you already shivering by the idea that I have to configure policies. This is not the data loss prevention type of policies on labeling, this user can do this and this group can do that. It's simple policies on allowing specific actions to be triggered as suspicious or not. What we're trying to do here, and this is where with Microsoft Purview, we're trying to feed into a risk-based system that allows every single thing that a user does to have a certain rating. If the rating is high enough, this becomes an alert that goes to the SOC. So we are going to completely turn around the logic. Instead of sending all the telemetry to the SOC immediately and then them to figure out whether this is normal or not, we're going to wait until something has a high enough risk level and then get that into the SOC. That's the idea. Then triage, investigation, and action happens. This is the insider risk management case that the SOC is supposed to be investigating. Now this means, and I'll get to that point, we're talking about high and critical type of alerts that will be triggered here. I'll give you some examples in a minute. Ideally, and this is what's happening in very mature environments, we're already seeing a split between some type of a COC and a SOC. And what is a COC? Yeah? It's typically a compliance operations center. Now, I'm sure that most of you don't want to build this. Yeah, good luck trying to build an operations center that has to look into alerts that are actually not security alerts, but they could be policy violations, or they could be things that need to be investigated from an audit perspective. The question mark here is this a job for the SOC team? Probably not, but who else is going to do it? So this is always a bit question mark, and I'm going to say this is not easy to set up, and it's not something that you need from the beginning. What we're going to do is we're going to use that, basically the intelligence that is already in the tool, and use the high-risk alerts only, send them to the SOC to immediately kickstart that data security project. That's the key message here. And so in most environments, we have the following two things happening. We call this a bit the triangle of paranoia. Yeah? If you look into user behavior and the data usage, this is what most organizations do. They try to do labeling, classification. Yes, there are tools around, including Microsoft Purview that can do an auto classification and so on. It works, it gives you some insights, but this is a long-term project. And then we're going to try, once we have labeling, we're going to try to set policies on what's permitted, what's not permitted, stop doing this, stop doing that. What a lot of organizations kind of miss is that insider risk management component that I'm just talking about. Because they always think, but this is more from a financial perspective, if users are doing something that they shouldn't be doing from an audit. It's totally not true. This is the element that you need if you already have a SOC that feeds into your SOC to be able to then do the rest. Because believe me, once you start with this, it's so much easier to start then with your data labeling, classification, and data loss prevention, because your SOC already has visibility into risky behavior that your users are doing. And I'll go even further and stating that even if you don't have any classification or labeling, by starting with a simple insider risk management project, you can already get a good view in a few weeks. And I'll show you a case where this is happening at a customer. So this is something often forgotten about. Yeah? And it's typically, and this is the key word of today, it's enrichment. Yeah? And it's a bit unfortunate that you've invested into an XDR system, maybe you've invested into a SIEM already, or a SecOps platform, and then you have data security a bit on their own, and it's not being fed with any of those signals you're already collecting, and vice versa. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever in the unified, let's say, tools perspective that we currently have in most environments. So let's have a look at how that will work. I think, again, from a Microsoft perspective, if you have already your Microsoft XDR environment, and maybe you already have an E5 license or an E5 security license, what your SOC is managing is this layer that's beneath, yeah? Is the layer that's above here. So something happens from an identity perspective, they'll try to see it, they'll try to correlate it with what's happening on the endpoints, what's happening in the cloud, what's happening on Office 365. This is all being correlated. But then we have the data layer. And so without visibility in that data layer, an adversary that is profiling your environment, that is not coming in through a suspicious identity. Let's say, I'll give you a real life case. Adversary logs in from an IP address or from a location that user has already logged in for. Yeah? They have been able to circumvent your multi-factor authentication. They're now inside this environment, and the only thing they do is access the files that the user has access to. Your SOC is not going to see much suspicious behavior as long as they keep stealthy. But from an insider risk management, this could trigger alert. This could increase the risk score of that identity, of that user, of that endpoint, to a moment where this gets an alert into the SOC saying, hey, there's nothing else here happening, but this user is doing some very risky behavior when it comes to data, purely on that data element. And so it's all things that we would be missing from a traditional SOC perspective that we can, with that insider risk management module, can actually get data from and those signals from. That's the idea. So the cool thing is that once we're there, once we say, okay, we're now going to collect all that data, we're going to have to we configure that insider risk management module. How can we now use this? Well, let's say someone is indeed downloading and deleting unusual number of files. Could be this triggers an alert with a low severity score, something we're going to ignore from the SOC perspective. However, they're now sending a copy to an external recipient through email, score increases, uploads files, score increases, prints documents, and so on and so on. Now, it's up to us to decide how far are we going to do that? Yeah? How far or when are we going to start to detect here? Is it very early on, more false positives, more work for the SOC? Or are we going to try to detect this a bit later on, still relevant for us, still time to investigate and to try to stop it, but less work for the SOC and really laser focused. That's a bit the idea. Once users are being marked with certain risk profiles, and this is where the beauty of those tools come in, and especially with Microsoft Purview, is that we can have different policies according to the user risk level. We can say, look, the SOC will not be involved if it's a low or a medium risk. The minute they get to a high risk, we are going to have an alert into the SOC to further investigate. And this is where the beauty comes, because if it now comes into the SOC can go back and look at the XDR data they already have and investigate, but what has this user specifically done with other elements that are maybe not part of the typical DLP alerts, looking at what happens on the endpoint, what happens with the identity, what happened with cloud usage of that user, and so on. So it's total enrichment. But the prime difference here is that the trigger point only comes when there is already a high risk activity that has happened. So we don't have to deep dive into millions of other alerts that are not relevant for security to start with. As you can see, the whole point is with those data security tools, after a while, the risk score goes down again. Yeah? And you can even go as far as having adaptive protection, where you say, the minute that a certain user gets to a certain level, we can block that user from doing things, from logging into certain systems, having access to certain files, and so on. But then we're already in the DLP project. Yeah? This is what I mentioned with get this working first, then have a look at DLP. That makes a lot more sense. Here you can see some, again, some more actions that can happen. We can have actions from Purview, we can have actions from Entra conditional access, and we can also, and this is a really interesting one, dynamically preserve deleted files. This is great for ransomware, this is great for adversaries that are trying to clean up, because the minute that someone has an elevated risk, I'm just going to keep a copy of all the files that this user is now deleting or touching on the system. It's a great type of work. So, just to give you an idea, and this is not just me talking about this from a theoretical perspective, we actually had a customer coming to us a few months ago with the following case. unfortunately, we are going to have to downsize. Yeah? Yeah. It happens. Yeah. Now, the problem was this was a company that had where employees had access to a lot of intellectual property. Yeah. And they were extremely worried about those employees that will be let go, that they will take that intellectual property with them, maybe to competition, maybe somewhere else. So, big problem. Biggest problem that they had was this was going to be announced in 2 weeks. Yeah, no DLP, no data labeling, nothing. How are we going to do this? They didn't even know, well, they had some idea of where critical data was, but not at a big point. So how are we going to do this? What we decided to do is let's put this theory to the test here, and let's try to activate only that inside the risk management module of Microsoft Purview. Luckily, they had the licenses, so we were able to activate this. Nothing was activated yet, so it was greenfield, basically. We created some policies. We created immediately together with them, had a look at where is maybe some of that critical data. They had a rough idea, this location, a bit here, a bit in this folder, a bit on this server, these type of things. And throughout the week of, throughout the 2 weeks period that we had before the announcement was done by the organization, we were able to get successful results. So this means, think about, you go from zero, no data labeling, nothing, towards a 2-week project in which we were able to get high risk scores from certain user activity, and then being able to follow up. And at that time, it was manual action if there was a user that tried to do something that they shouldn't be doing, but that was totally acceptable given the circumstances. We could always later on put that into policies. What was the result of this, of those 2 weeks? We had multiple suspicious scenarios, users that were doing things that they should not be doing, and even things that when confronted, the user said, but I've been doing this for years. Management was like, what do you mean you've been doing this for years? They had no idea, no visibility, no idea. And even 3 cases where it was so unacceptable that it was a breach of terms of acceptable use policy, and even 1 case where legal action was pursued against the employer just because it was very, very clear that they were trying to steal data specifically on leaving that organization. So this was presented by the CISO to the board of directors, and obviously because of the nice results of this, they immediately got the budget to start with the entire DLP project at that time. But just to give you an idea on how fast we were able to get this up and running and how it works, because this was purely from a SOC perspective. This was purely, let's look at the high risk alerts of those users, get it into the SOC, and then investigate. That was the idea. So 2 weeks' time, it is possible. With DLP, starting a DLP project in 2 weeks, forget about it. It's just not realistic. So how can we get to something quite fast? This is how we do it, right? That's the idea. Now maybe some quick lessons learned. I think if you want to start, the idea is that you start immediately with that inside risk management module. It gives you, hopefully there's already a monitoring in place. It gives the security people a lot more insight in what people are doing with the data itself. And then after that, we can always go into more longer-term enterprise-wide initiatives into seeing how do we label data, how can we go further. But that's really the point here. It's about how do we make that data security again into something agile, not a project that takes years and years and years to investigate and to start, so that no one really wants to start a project with this. It actually works much, much better. And so as a wrap-up, maybe, I have 2 minutes left, I see, so I think the next point here is going then to be, and everyone is working with this, is how do we now use AI and how to secure AI in a SOC environment using exactly the same tools. I think one of the key elements here that we're interested in from a SOC perspective is the first one. It's data leakage. I mean, data oversharing, don't really care from a security perspective. Non-compliance usage, I don't care from a SOC perspective. These are all issues that is a security issue, but it's not a SOC perspective issue, So it's the first one. Interesting with the data security posture management tools that are out there, including that from Microsoft, you can actually see what users are using. And by the way, one that really stands out is Notion and all those other tools that users can just subscribe to online, have a subscription, and they keep all their tasks in there. Super confidential information sometimes, and it's out there. So how do we make sure that we at least have visibility as a starting point? And then, remember the risk score. We can now combine risky actions by users using data combined, but where are they, in which data models are they putting this? So you can see here some of the data models that are being used by users that is already trying to be filtered out on the high risk actions. This is where I would start with from a SOC perspective as well. Someone is using an AI model, using data that they shouldn't put into an AI model. Well, it was already identified, and that's something that we then want to clear out. So that's something basically that we can put in there. As a wrap up, I think important as well, going much further, and this is a discussion for later on. If you want, I'm available. Stick around for a discussion. But you can also have, with those data models that are in there, we can have very proprietary data easily identified by the models. I can feed the model data on this is what for us is proprietary. So we don't have to manually label everything. It can learn what is proprietary, what is confidential in your environment quite easy. And then these are those custom models. Again, I'll talk about that later if you want offline. But where you can really have those models learn. It's not just a dumb thing on turning it on. Learn what's normal for your environment. If you're biotech, it will learn certain biotech recipes and whatever it is as test results as being very suspicious or very confidential, and other things not, and so on. Things like this. So that's a bit the idea. All right, well, I'm going to have to stop here. So thanks very much. If you have any questions, stick around. Happy to address them. Okay? Thank you.